So now what we're going to do, Jay Brandt with Walnut Creek Seeds, he's going to lead us through the plot tour. He's got his own things to talk about. I don't want to step on his toes too much, but we'll just let him have the floor now.
So we live up in Fairfield County, southeast of Columbus. The Walnut Creek comes from the fact that we live in the Little Walnut Creek watershed. From that standpoint, our farm there in Fairfield County has been involved in conservation agriculture since the middle 1970s. My father, when he came back from Vietnam, had a small family and was able to get a position on a tenant farm, farming 700 acres with 4-row equipment. So he didn't have a lot of time to do tillage, so he adopted no-till when it came out with a 4-row Alice Chalmers. Started with that and then slowly advanced up into the deer conservation, the 7000 series planters when it got to that way. So he has a lot of experience in making no-till work because not many people knew about it at the start. And having 2 little kids, 300 sows and 60 Charolais cattle, he was busy, and 700 acres of cropland to take care of. So that's kind of where he got that start. So we started just for erosion was the big thing. So he didn't want to have to fix gullies in the spring. We started adopting and use of cover crops to minimize erosion primarily. So he was using things like extra wheat or cereal rye or leftover soybean seed, whatever he had on hand, because obviously resources were tight back then as well, and you didn't have the money to spend on planting the whole farm to expensive seeds. So he devised a lot of ways to utilize what he had there and to get that job done, and learned quite a bit from that standpoint. So the biggest thing that he noticed was that where he planted the cover crops, the crops were better. His cash crops the following year. So he started to increase the amount of acreage that was covered. Of course, back then you had the 3-crop rotation with the wheat. So he was doing some combination of double crop soybeans when that was available, or using other crops from that standpoint. So a lot of times he didn't have the time to even harvest double crop soybeans with everything else going on. So he would get group 7 or group 9 soybeans if he could find them, because they would be less expensive maybe than hairy vetch or some of the clovers at the time. And so those were some of the tricks that he was learning how to do that. So we advanced then as he got into some bigger equipment. We could cover ground a little bit better. There started to be more information we were getting from the people grazing from that standpoint, and using livestock management and using annual crops, warm season and cool season, in the 2000s, as well as this soil health movement that started to kick up from the USDA and the National Resource Conservation Service. Being that Dad had worked as a county extension agent for a while, he was really involved in a lot of those discussions. So we were able to be in some of the front edge development on that, in adoption, in agronomic, in crop rotation practices. Probably things that had been done, like he said, his grandfather used those practices, so it was pretty easy for him to adopt that. But mainly had been with single species, and that's kind of where we'll start down at the end, and we'll work our way this direction. And looking at the benefit of single species, and then how to combine those together to add more benefits. So in fact, that it's not just additive benefits, that it's multiplicative benefits, right? So power of the times, not plus. His involvement there started, as we said, getting into the multi-species and developing those practices. He had people ask about getting availability of seeds, and had partnered with some early seed companies. And so we kind of developed our relationship based on that, to provide in our region here in the Ohio Valley some really good, what we call prescription mixes that work well in our cropping system, corn, soybeans, and wheat, as well as for integrating grazing and those types of rotations in your system. So that our foundation is primarily in conservation and education, and in ways to help you better utilize your soil from that standpoint. So if we wanted to get up and walk out in the sun for a little bit, we'll try to move our way back into the shade fairly quickly and go down to the end here. So.